The Puma Deviate Nitro 3 and the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, two shoes that on paper should do the same thing, but in reality, the story is very, very different. Last year in 2023, both the previous versions of these two shoes were extremely popular, and in fact, they made the top of best of lists all across running. But in 2024, I'm sure there's many people wondering, is it worth upgrading both of these shoes, or if you're only looking to upgrade one, which is going to be the one to upgrade? Well, a bit of a spoiler alert, this is the one you want to upgrade, this is the one you want to ignore, but it's not quite that black and white. So there still is quite a bit to talk about, and that's what we're going to get into here. And as always with my versus videos, let's start with the specs. However, this is going to be a modified spec section because they've been getting a little long-winded, and I'm trying to just give an overview about these shoes. So looking at these two shoes, you can see from a stack height standpoint that there's only a 1 mil difference between these two shoes. And the drop of both these shoes also differs. So in the Puma Deviate Nitro 3, we have a 10 mil drop. And I'm going to say the real feel of that drop is probably 8 to 10 mil. It feels like that. It puts you up on your toes. Definitely feels that way. Where with the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, the drop is 8 mil. But I'm going to say the real feel of that is 6 to 8 because it does feel like a much flatter shoe. It feels quite good on the foot. The weights are different. There's a 1 ounce or about a 30-gram difference, and I will say that the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4 feels considerably lighter when you pick both these shoes up and on foot, and I think that adds to the performance of the shoe considerably. Looking at the weights of the two pairs of shoes that I actually own, you can see for the Deviate Nitro 3 that they're very close to the spec, and I think that speaks to the high build quality of the Puma. It's exceptionally well built. And for the Endorphin Speed 4, they're within tolerances. They're very close, nothing to really worry about there. But as I said, you do feel the lightness of the Speed 4. Now, a new metric to this specs page is that little graphic next to the stacks. So for the Puma Deviate Nitro 3, what I'm trying to illustrate is how that shoe feels, how the foams feel in that midsole. And what I'm getting there is the blue arrow is deformation. So how much compliance does the foam have? When you strike the ground, are you getting cushion? Are you sinking into the foam? And I will say with the Deviate Nitro 3, I do feel cushion. I do feel like the foam is absorbing the shock of the strike. However, the red arrow is rebound, how much resiliency the foam has, how much energy return I'm actually getting. I'm going to say that I feel almost nothing. When I strike the ground in the Puma Deviate Nitro 3, I feel the cushion, and that's it. So overall, the ride for me is very unlively. It's just a very sort of firm and unlively ride. It's not very fun. Whereas with the Endorphin Speed 4, the deformation is definitely there. I'm getting, definitely feeling a little sink into the foam. I'm feeling the cushion. However, the rebound is significant. I'm feeling the energy return. I'm feeling the foam sort of working with me and pushing my foot off into the next stride. So overall, the Endorphin Speed 4 has a very bouncy, fun feel, very lively, very different than the Deviate Nitro 3. So looking at the midsole constructions of both these shoes, they're very similar. They're two pieces of foam with a plate in between. Looking at the Deviate Nitro 3, we have Puma's Nitro Elite foam above the plate. Now this is their last generation supercritical EVA PIBA blend. And below the plate, we have their Nitro foam, which is their supercritical TPEE foam found across their training series. And in between that, we have a forked in the forefoot carbon infused plate. It's not a carbon fiber plate, it's a carbon infused plate, but it is a fairly stiff plate, at least in the midfoot in the heel. In the Endorphin Speed 4, we have a full Power Run PB midsole, top and bottom. Now, Power Run PB is a beaded Pebax. Pebax is sort of the brand name of PIBA. It's the same place that Nike sources Zoom X from. And the beadedness of this foam adds to the durability, which is why Saucony went with beaded Pebax foam for Power Run PB all those years ago when I believe they launched it in the Endorphin series. And between the two pieces of foam, you have a winged nylon plate, which has wings in the midfoot on both the lateral and medial side. And overall, it's a very, very flexible plate, and you really notice that. And in fact, I think it's probably the most flexible plate I've ever felt in any shoe. And from a geometry standpoint, the Puma Deviate Nitro 3 is pretty standard. You have a mild forefoot rocker and a heel bevel. There's nothing kind of out of the ordinary there. It's very standard. And in the Endorphin Speed 4, you have Saucony speed roll technology and geometry. And what that is a exaggerated toe spring from the plate in the forefoot. And I will say that it actually is very noticeable and makes the Endorphin Speed, again, perform exceptionally well. And moving to the outsoles of these two shoes, I'm looking at the contact patch first. As you can see, the Endorphin Speed 4 is considerably wider in the forefoot, midfoot, and waist. And you do notice that. The Endorphin Speed 4 has a very planted, very stable feel on foot, where the Deviate Nitro 3, because of that really narrow waist, is surprisingly squirrely and kind of unstable, especially for how firm the foam is in that shoe. Now, I'm a forefoot striker, and I'm even noticing how kind of squirrely the shoe is. I wouldn't necessarily call it fully unstable, but it does feel like it's a little bit all over the place, where the Endorphin Speed 4 definitely feels extremely planted. And I think that's the overall width and the heel flare in this shoe. Also, for someone who still runs in a neutral shoe but does want a little bit of stability features, Saucony generally puts that into their shoes, and the Endorphin Speed 4 is really no different. As I said, it's a very, very planted and stable ride. And then looking at the rubber coverage on the outsole, both of these have decent coverage, but I will say the Deviate Nitro 3 is a bit surprising. I've had very good luck with Puma grip in the Velocity Nitro 3. It's been one of the best outsole compounds I've felt in that shoe. However, in this shoe, it doesn't really work, and I don't really know why, other than I think that tread pattern that you can see on the forefoot rubber is just too dense. It's too close. So what ends up happening with the Deviate Nitro 3 is on wet concrete like sidewalk or like wet tile sidewalk, the shoe is actually very slippery, and I don't know why, other than the grip pattern is too tight actually. And I will say that overall the shoe is very squeaky. It feels like a court shoe, or sounds like a court shoe on a basketball court or something. I've never noticed that in any other running shoe, and I definitely didn't notice that in the Velocity Nitro 3. So I don't exactly know what's going on with this outsole, but it's not the best execution of Puma grip that I've felt to date. Where the outsole on the Endorphin Speed 4 is a lattice in the forefoot, it allows flex, it allows the foam to kind of do what it does, which is really nice, and it gives a lot of grip. And the two little pieces in the heel also are very effective. The one thing I'll say about the outsole rubber on the Endorphin Speed is I am seeing a little bit more wear than I want to, especially as I approach about 100 miles in my pair of Endorphin Speeds. But I'm not getting any sort of grip issues out there on the road, and it works wet, dry, and everything in between. Let's start with the fit and feel of these two shoes, and I'll start with the Deviate Nitro 3. And this is probably the one place I can really compliment this shoe. As I said in the specs, the build quality of this shoe is exceptional. Asics used to be the gold standard for build quality for me, but I think Puma has really one-upped Asics. This shoe is beautifully built and beautifully constructed, and the materials in this shoe feel exceptionally well. Now, from a fit standpoint, I would describe this as a performance fit, which means it's very low volume in the forefoot, a very constricting midfoot, and the heel for my foot actually locks me down very well. But I think this overly complicated heel with not a lot of padding could cause some people some heel lift problems, especially because this shoe is actually very stiff, especially in the midfoot and heel. So this isn't going to really want to latch on to a lot of people's heels. So I think it's going to take some lacing for a lot of people to really get the heel lift issue to stop in the shoe. But for me, I'm not experiencing any heel lift. And in fact, the overall fit of the shoe is actually really good. It's what I prefer in a performance fit shoe. It's tight, but not too tight, and it's somewhere between a race fit and a more plush training fit, a little bit closer to a race fit, but still it has some softness because it is a trainer. Now, I went true to size in this shoe. I'm a US men's size 9, but my foot is actually on the small size of that size. So sometimes I can fit in an 8.5. And in this shoe, I'm going to say that my toe is about 5 millimeters or a little bit under a quarter inch from the tip of the shoe, which is very tight. But because the lockdown of the shoe is so good, I'm not getting any sort of shoe or foot movement in this shoe. So it's what I want in a performance fit. But if your foot is on the larger end of your size, you may want to go up half a size. Actually, I would recommend to go up half a size. You may even want to go up a full size to get some volume in the forefoot of this shoe. Now, this is a Puma, so it is very narrow. I would consider this a very narrow fit. So if you have a wide foot, this is probably not the shoe for you. And moving to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, this is probably the only place I can be really critical of this shoe. Overall, I think the upper materials and the build quality of this shoe are a little cheap and a little shoddy. There's some weird TPU overlays. The material selection for this engineered mesh is very rough and not very pleasant. I think the finish around the heel collar and the ankle is not the greatest. It's just on par with Saucony shoes. I just always feel Saucony shoes feel very cheap in hand and they just never fit really great. Maybe I just don't have a Saucony shaped foot. And on that note, the toe box in this shoe actually has a very strange shape. The lateral side swoops in very drastically, very quickly, and the medial side sort of cantilevers over the foam of the shoe. This little lip here that my big toe has formed was here since the start. This wasn't my toe making this, it was just here. So it's a very odd fit, and it's kind of pointy. Now, I went true to size in this shoe as well, and I have about a full thumb's width between the end of my big toe and the front of the shoe, which I think speaks to the pointiness of this shoe. So you may be okay also going true to size in this shoe, but again, I think the width of the toe area, not the toe box, but the toe area is very narrow. But as far as the toe box, this part of the foot, where the ball of the foot is, this isn't an overly narrow shoe, so it also has a generous fit upper. That's why I'm saying the upper on this shoe fits very sloppy. So if you have a wideish foot, you may be okay in this shoe, but just keep that in mind. It's got a very odd shaped toe box in this shoe. I think the heel counter in this shoe is padded enough, but there's enough of a pocket back here that it's going to hold the heel. Plus, this is a very flexible shoe. So heel lift should not be an issue in this. And again, the eyelet chain gives decent lockdown, so you'll be okay. But just overall, the build quality, fit finish of this shoe is on par with Saucony, but that just feels cheap to me. And the overall fit of this shoe is sloppy and vague, but it does the job. But it's nothing that's going to win any type of award. And moving to the ride of these two shoes and starting with the Deviate Nitro 3, as I said in the spec screen, this is a very unlively ride. In fact, this is probably one of the most unfun, unpleasant rides I have experienced in a running shoe in some time. And I think I've narrowed that down to really two problems with this shoe for at least my foot. Now, the first one is the Nitro Elite foam, the foam that's above the plate in this shoe. What I feel when I strike the ground is I feel the cushion, I feel this absorbing the foot strike, but then that's it. There's nothing else. There's no sort of rebound or energy return or nothing. It almost feels like I strike the ground, I compress the foam, and the only time the foam sort of deforms and goes back to its default state is when I unload the foot. Otherwise, the foam isn't really helping me at all. That's a bit of a problem in a performance trainer like this shoe is intended to be. The bigger problem I think that I've identified in this shoe is the plate. Now, I've already said that it's very stiff in the heel, very stiff in the midfoot, but it's almost non-existent and very floppy in the forefoot. So you're getting the worst of a carbon fiber plate or a carbon infused plate, giving you an overly rigid heel and midfoot with none of the benefit, especially for a low plate configuration shoe like this is, because the plate swoops very low and close to the ground in the forefoot. Because of that forked plate in this shoe, it just makes the forefoot of this shoe just very soft. I'm getting none of that roll that I would expect from a low plate configuration carbon infused or any type of plate, frankly, in this type of shoe. And it just feels very spongy. Additionally, if you look at the parts of the midsole, and specifically you can see the plate from the underside in this image, you see there is a fork in this shoe. That's what I'm talking about. Now again, we're looking at this from the bottom. So the medial side, the side that's under the big toe, is the bigger side. That little wing is on the lateral side. That's the outside around the pinky toe. Now that I think is making the forefoot of this plate overly soft. But the bigger issue that I think that I'm actually running into, and I've heard other people talk about this issue, you can see very, very clearly here. Now this is the piece of nitro foam under the plate, the supercritical TPE foam. This is the foam that's in Puma's other training shoes. As you can see, there's a pocket for the plate to sit in here, And you can see that there's a channel of nitro foam running in the middle of the plate where that fork is that goes right into the midfoot. Now, think about it this way. You have a carbon-infused plate, and then you have a different density material of the nitro foam, and then you have a softer, more compliant foam above that in the Nitro Elite. So when I'm striking the ground, I think what's actually happening is that Nitro Elite foam is compressing, and it's creating a pressure point along that ridge of nitro foam, the denser foam, in the forefoot, specifically on the lateral side, where people have been experiencing hot spots and discomfort. I definitely am feeling some discomfort there. And in fact, after a couple runs in this shoe, the second run in this shoe, actually, I felt some soreness and almost felt like I had bruised my forefoot on both feet. So I think that little ridge that's in the fork is actually poking into the Nitro Elite foam above it. Not a great solution, not a great feel for a performance trainer. Moving to the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4, as critical as I was about this upper, that's the last criticism I really have of the shoe, because the performance and the ride of the shoe is exceptional. And that all comes down to this midsole, this Power Run PB midsole, and this plate specifically. This shoe is a joy to run in, and it works exceptionally well. So what's going on here is we have a foam that has good compliance, means you sink into this a little bit. It's not like ZoomX, but you definitely do feel the cushion in the shoe. However, when I compress this foam, I feel a lot of energy return in this foam. It's very eager off the toe. That's the resiliency or the energy return of this foam. And this foam is great for that. Additionally, you have the nylon plate that's in this shoe. As I said, there's wings on the midfoot of the shoe. You can see one right there, and you can see one right there. What that does is center the foot, so you're getting the maximum sort of engagement of the forefoot of the shoe so that you can really roll forward. So the speed roll technology in this shoe is actually an exaggerated toe spring in this shoe, which actually makes this shoe, again, very eager to roll off the forefoot. So between the good resiliency or the energy return of this foam with the geometry of the plate and the speed roll technology, this shoe is just eager to roll forward, absorb, roll forward, absorb, roll forward. This shoe is a joy to run, and it's very bouncy, it's very lively, and it's very fun to run in. And more specifically, what's going on here with this plate is something that's very unique to Saucony's engineering. So here you can see the Endorphin Speed 4 plate profile along with a Vaporfly plate, which is really the gold standard for a low plate configuration shoe. And as you can see, they have a similar shape. They start high in the heel, they dip in the midfoot, there's a spoon in the forefoot, and there's a toe spring in the front of the plate. However, if you draw a straight line basically from the heel area across the length of the plate, you can see for the Vaporfly plate that the toe spring actually doesn't come up very much above that straight line. But in the Endorphin Speed plate, it really comes up above that. And I think that's the exaggerated speed roll technology. I think that's why this shoe is so eager to roll forward. So what you're getting from a very flexible plate as well in a foam that has, good compliance and good resiliency is that the Vaporfly ride is very much propulsive from the midfoot and off the toe, whereas the Endorphin Speed, you get some of that propulsion off the midfoot, but there's a lot of roll and a lot of propulsion off of the toe. So again, the Endorphin Speed is just a very lively, very fun ride. Now, if I put both of these shoes on the performance matrix that I use in all of these Versus videos, I think it's especially important here because these are both performance trainers. Looking at the Endorphin Speed, which I've shown in a bunch of other videos, I really do think this shoe has a great range from easy into threshold, but it's happiest at that sort of steady, just getting into threshold running. It just does that extremely well. And I will say it's very, very comfortable to do easy running in this shoe as well. Though it is a plated trainer and it's not a shoe I'd recommend as your only shoe, I would pair this with a non-plated daily trainer. But for those runs where you're doing a workout where you have some faster running, in between some easy running, this is a great option because it does that whole range really well. Now, if we look at the Deviate Nitro 3, I'm going to be totally honest. I don't know where this shoe falls on here because I could not determine that from the running that I did in it. Now, I think, according to Puma's marketing and engineering, I think they intended this shoe to be here in the same place as the Endorphin Speed 4, but I'm not feeling that. This shoe is very harsh and unpleasant for easy running. It doesn't do steady running very well. It's a lot of effort to do steady running. And once I got into threshold or into race paces, marathon pace, half marathon pace. It was a ton of effort. And I think that's a combination of the foam that's not giving anything in return, the very soft plate in the forefoot that's really doing nothing, and overall the geometry of the shoe is also nothing special. So there's really nothing that's working in this shoe for me. So I really can't put it on this matrix, but this I think is where it's intended to be. So what's the verdict here? Well, it shouldn't be a surprise because I already spoiled it at the beginning of the video, but this is the better shoe, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 4. This is actually a very surprising shoe to me because I have not been very positive on Saucony as a brand, and I avoided the Endorphin series for quite some time. I did run in the original one. I did not like it, but I've been very, very pleasantly surprised with this shoe, and this is definitely a shoe that will see me get it over 100 miles. So I will be back with a longer term review of the shoe, but if you're looking for a performance trainer or you owned either one of these shoes in this video, this is the one to upgrade if you already haven't, because this shoe's been out for a few months. But this is a wonderful update. I think it's a wonderful shoe, and I think it's a wonderful addition to anyone's rotation when you're looking for a performance trainer to do a range of running from easy into threshold. This is definitely one of the best options out there. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.